translation. Any reliable translation would be just fine to follow along. Judges chapter 2, beginning at verse number 1. Then the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I led you up from Egypt and brought you to the land of which I swore to your fathers, and I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? Therefore I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall be thorns in your side, and their gods shall be a snare to you. So it was when the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voices and wept. And then they called the name of the place Bochum, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. And when Joshua had dismissed the people, the children of Israel went each to his own inheritance to possess the land. So the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Now Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died when he was 110 years old, and they buried him within the border of his inheritance in Timnath Ares, in the mountains of Ephraim on the north side of Mount-Gish. When all that generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation arose after them, who did not know the Lord or the work which he had done for Israel. Judges 2, 1 through 10. I thought this morning, don't let this be the last generation. Don't let this be the last generation. Every generation is unique, whether we are considering the size, the thoughts, or the talents. In the book Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell said, we overlook just how large a role we all play, and by we, I mean society, in determining who makes it and who doesn't. I'm here to let you know this morning that every generation is important and needs to teach the next generation. A church without youth is a church without a future. Moreover, youth without a church is a youth without a future. I don't know about you, but I'm concerned. I'm deeply concerned about the absence of our youth from the life, the education, the fellowship, the worship of the New Testament church. We ought to be concerned when there are no babies crying. We ought to be concerned when there's no youth filling our Sunday school classes. We ought to be concerned that we don't even need to have Bible classes for youth on midweek Bible study. There ought to be a concern that we don't even have enough youth to conduct a youth Sunday worship service. There ought to be a deep concern in the hearts and the minds of us as the people of God. For where is the church going to be without youth? Don't let this be the last generation. How many folks in here are under 30? Raise your hand. Of those of you who are under 30, How many of you are visiting with us? Just keep your hands up. If you're visiting with us and you're under 30, by and large, we see that the demographic that is missing from the church are our youth. In this text, there is the encounter, there is the experience, and there is the exit. The encounter takes place in Judges chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. There is an encounter between the angel of the Lord and the children of Israel. This is no everyday angel. This angel is not a created being like Michael or Gabriel. In fact, this is a theophany. It is an appearance and revelation of the Lord himself. The Lord makes a special appearance, signifying the importance and the magnitude of this historical situation. The angel of the Lord shows up often on the pages of Scripture. For the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in the flame of a burning bush in Exodus chapter 3 and verse number 2. The angel of the Lord led Israel out of Egypt, Exodus 14 and verse 19. The angel of the Lord appeared to Balaam in Numbers chapter 22, verses 31 and 32. The angel of the Lord appeared to a man named Gideon, Judges chapter 6 and verse number 12. The angel of the Lord appeared to Samson's parents in Judges 13 and verse number 3. The angel of the Lord shows up when God wants to deliver a message of great significance. Whenever the Lord shows up, the Lord has something to say. For the Lord does not risk any error or misunderstanding of this word. For the authenticity and the accuracy of God's word is eternally important. We must always do our best to handle God's word with integrity, with honesty and truthfulness. It is in our best interest to hear and to heed the word of God. Regardless of our circumstances, I want us to know that the Lord has something to say. If I'm wounded, he has a word. If I'm a mess, he has a message. If I'm confused, he has a communication. If I'm struggling, he has a statement. If I'm troubled, he has a truth. If I'm in pain, he has a promise. If I'm discouraged, he has a directive. If I'm anxious, he has an answer. If I'm sick, he has a statute. If I'm trashed, he has a testimony. Regardless of our circumstances, the Lord has something to say. He has something to say because the Lord can turn your situation around. He can calm your storms. The Lord can comfort you during your trials. He can ease your afflictions. He can strengthen you during weakness. He can bring joy to a troubled heart. He can speak healing to our hurts. He can speak comfort to our pain. He can speak blessing to our burdens. He can speak victory to our battles. The Lord shows up because he has something to say. And in the text there is an encounter. The Lord calls a congregational meeting. The encounter takes place because the Lord has something to say to the children of Israel. The situation is dim. It is important to realize that the text is not in chronological order. The material is not merely arranged to capture a linear historicity of the events. But most importantly, it is arranged to convey a specific message. The conquests and victories in the land of promise are now behind them. This is an encounter between the Lord and a disobedient people. The function of this text is to explain the events of chapter 1. They did not drive out all of the Canaanites from the land because of their disobedience. So the angel of the Lord begins with a statement of his deliverance. The Lord led the children of Israel up out of Egypt. The Lord sustained them during their days in the wilderness, and he brought them to the promised land. Sometimes the Lord has to remind us of what he's done for us. Sometimes he has to remind us because the truth is we have short memories. In fact, some of us have selective amnesia when it comes to the Lord's work in our lives. The Lord did not remind them of the past in order to rub it in their faces. He does so in order to provoke them to change. We need a generation of bold believers who will remember what the Lord has done for them. We are the beneficiaries of the blessings that the Lord has bestowed on our ancestors and our predecessors. I want you to know that God loves you so much that Jesus died for you. In Christ, he has forgiven you of all sins. That God listens to your prayers. That he's there even when you can't feel him, touch him, or see him. In his wisdom, he has worked all of the good and bad of your life together for his perfect plan in your life. Always remember that you made it. You might have been a bastard child, but you still made it. You might be a single parent, but you made it. You might have some lonely days and weary nights, but you made it. You might have been depressed and suicidal, but you made it. You might have been looked over and forgotten, but you made it. You made it through the bullying. You made it through the letdowns. You led it through the body shaming. You made it through the learning disabilities. You made it through the loss of loved ones. You made it through the difficult classes. You made it through the painful breakups. You made it through the fake friends. You made it through an empty refrigerator. You made it without a car. You made it without credentials before and after your name. You made it through the shame of sexual assault. You made it through the unhelpful parents. You made it through the crooked HR departments. You made it through the storms and the rain. Somebody ought to shout, I made it. Life may not be perfect, but I made it. It wasn't my degree. It wasn't that I went to a prestigious college or university. It was because somebody was talking to God on my behalf. Somebody was praying for me through the storms and the winds and adversities of life. Somebody was calling my name before the throne of heaven, and God answered. That's why I made it. Sometimes we forget what God has done. In Psalm 78, verses 4 through 8, God wanted them to know and to remember what he had done for them. The psalmist says in Psalm 78, verse 4 through 8, we will not hide them from their children. Talking about what God has done. We're not going to hide what God has done from our children. Telling to the generation to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wonderful works that he has done. For he established a testimony in Jacob. Without trials, without tests, we have no testimony, but we have a testimony because of what God has done in our lives. And he appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, the children who would be born, that they may arise and declare them to their children, that they may set their hope in God, and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that did not set his heart aright, and whose spirit was not faithful to God. God wants us to remember him and to remember what he's done in our lives, and to teach it to our children, that our children might teach it to their children, that in every generation, that there might be some believers, that there might be some people of faith, that there might be some people who have set their hope in God. Their hope is not in money. Their hope is not in material things. Their hope is not in society. Their hope is not in democracy, but their hope is in God. I wish I had one or two witnesses this morning. The Lord has liberated the oppressed. The Lord has opened doors of opportunity. The Lord has made ways out of no way. The Lord has been our bridge over troubled waters. The Lord fed us and sustained us through oppression, discrimination, through wars and all manners of evils. We are not here because of our own strength, our own intellect, or our own willpower. We need to know that there's nothing new under the sun. Amen. I know you're bright. I know you got a high GPA. I know you you in advanced classes, and I know you read well and all of that wonderful stuff, but please understand, I don't mean any harm, but there's nothing new under the sun. Amen. You might be intelligent. You might be, maybe you scored, you blew the SAT out of the park, but please understand that Solomon was the wisest man that ever lived. And Solomon got his wisdom not from the education, not from Dayton Public Schools, not from Stivers, not from UD. I don't mean any harm. Ain't no problem with those universities, no problem with those schools, but that's not what Solomon got his wisdom. Solomon got his wisdom from the Lord. And Solomon said, if you're going to be wise, here's the conclusion of the whole matter. What's the whole matter, Solomon? What's the conclusion? Fear God and keep his commandments. I believe that Solomon was right. Amen. So you need to understand. And when I have a problem with young people, it's not that you are bright, it's not that you're intelligent. Amen. Our ancestors sacrificed so that you can be where you are today. My problem is when we don't have any gratitude. My problem is when we think that we know everything, and that those who came before us were stupid, dumb, and ignorant. But those stupid, dumb, and ignorant folk open doors for you. Those same folks open doors for you. Those same people sacrifice so that you can have a quality education. They sacrifice so that you can wear Gucci. They sacrifice so that you can get your hair done and go down to the store and get you some, amen, get you some hair and get you some fake nails. Amen. They sacrifice so that you can eat good and live good. They sacrifice. They walk so that you could ride. They stood up so that you could have a place in this world. So how dare you cast dispersions on your ancestors and the ones who have made a way for you because you stand on their shoulders.
Go ahead.
We are here because of God's grace and God's mercy. It has never been because of our power, but because of God's power. Not only did he free them, but he also was faithful to them. The Lord promised to never break his covenant with their fathers, which were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the Lord kept his word. He gave them descendants like he told Abraham. Abraham, who was barren, and his wife was barren. Abraham, who had no children. God said before he even had Ishmael, long before he had Isaac, I go down to the seashore. Look at the sand on the seashore. That's how many descendants you're going to have. Look at the stars in the sky. Count them. That's how many descendants you're going to have. And God kept his promise. God said, I'm going to bring you to a land that's not your own. It's going to be a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And God kept his promise.
Yes, sir. Man.
We need a generation of bold believers who know the Lord is faithful. David put it this way in Psalm 37, verse 25. He said, I've been young, and now I'm old, yet I've not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. Everyone in your world may let you down, but the Lord never will. Adults may let you down. Parents, teachers, coaches, and leaders may disappoint you, but the Lord never will. What I'm simply trying to tell you is don't take your frustrations out on us. Don't take your frustrations out on the church. Don't take your frustrations out on the ministers. Don't take their frustration out on the Lord. In many cases, you are right to be frustrated. But you can't solve a problem from the outside.
Come on, preacher. Please, come on.
What I get frustrated about is people who always they never have anything positive to say about the church.
Come on, preacher. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, man, I was doing a little dialogue with Webb last week, and we were talking about youth. I told him I wanted to preach in terms of what's going on with our youth today and the need for there to be more youth in the church. And he says, well, why aren't more men going into ministry? Is it that our colleges are not producing ministers? I said, no, the colleges and the universities have never produced preachers. Preachers are birthed out of local congregations.
Amen, brother.
That's always been the case.
That's right.
God raises up people from within the body of Christ.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, the church has some problems. Yes, we have some things that we need to correct, some things that we can work on. But you can't help us out on the outside. We need you on the inside.
Yeah. All right. Come on.
The Lord may not give you everything you want.
Right.
Because that's not his job.
Right. That's right.
But the Lord will be there with you through the good and the bad.
Yes.
You see, this encounter also reveals the irrational nature of faithlessness of the children of Israel. Let me just say this as well. Many of you who follow social media, you are aware that last week a member of the body of Christ, a young man named Matthew Johnson, went on The Voice and sang about Jesus. And now that young man is on Team Legend. And you heard John Legend say that I got my start in the church.
Yes, sir.
Where does Matthew get his start from? The church. And I look at the young man and I say, look at God working in the life of this young man. He doesn't have to put Christ aside to be great in the world.
Yes, sir. Come on.
He can be great and he can be received as a bold believer in Jesus Christ by still being faithful to the Lord.
Come on, teacher. Yes, sir.
The Lord has done all of this for them. And their response is disobedience. They were not to make alliances with the people of the land, and they were commanded to tear down their altars to idol deities. Their failure to do this caused the people to become thorns and their idols to become snares. You see, the Lord did not want the children of Israel to make alliances or covenants with the people of the land because he did not want them to become like the people. He said, don't make any covenants with them. Don't make any agreements with them, because what's going to happen is y'all will start intermarrying one another, and then before you know it, y'all are going to be worshiping their idols. And God says, I'm a jealous God. You can't worship me and worship other gods at the same time. You see, be careful about who you hitch your wagon to. In other words, choose your friends wisely. Especially be careful about who you date.
Yes, sir.
And if your dating is distracting you from the word and the work of the Lord, then it's going in the wrong direction. I've watched many of us over the years, and how when we start dating certain individuals, we start drifting away from the Lord. And it's almost always because, in part, the person that we are now in covenant with, in relationship with, in alliance with, in a dating relationship with, they don't know the Lord. They're not interested in the Lord. And now we start dating them. Some of us are still waiting for the church to do this. No, it's time for you to do something.
Come on.
You're looking for the church to do something. It's time for you to do something. You do it out there. Why not do it as a part of the body of Christ? This encounter with the angel of the Lord brought the children of Israel to tears. In fact, the name of this place was called Goshen, literally meaning weeping. I don't believe they wept because they were heartbroken about their disobedience, because it would rampantly continue for the next 400 years. This same disobedience would continue for the next 400 years. But perhaps they wept because the Lord did not have anything good to say about them. They are weeping, but then, matter of fact, the text says they sacrificed there to the Lord. The place of weeping became a place of worship. It's amazing how a decision can change your situation. They decided to sacrifice. They decided to worship. Have you decided to make a change? Nothing changes until everything changes. What will you change in your life? Is it your complaining? Is it your attitude problem? Is it your finger pointing? Is it your excuse making? What are you willing to change in your life? Not only was there the encounter, but then there was also the experience. Don't let this be the last generation. You see, the experience of the leadership made the difference. Joshua and the elders who outlived him were their spiritual leaders. As long as these men lived, the children of Israel served the Lord. And Joshua is deeply rooted in the will and the plan and the program of God. He was a man of faith. He was a man who had been with Moses, an assistant to Moses. He was a man who was there when they heard the noise of war in the camp. Joshua was one of Moses' chosen men. He was loyal to Moses. He was one of the 12 spies. He was one of only 2 men from his generation who would enter the land of promise. I mean, Joshua was a special kind of person. And this generation served the Lord because of both education and experience. What do you mean, preacher? The oral tradition of the faith was passed down from generation to generation. They taught one another the words of the covenant and the law. They also educated one another through song. The fathers taught their faith to their children. For the law said, you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. They served the Lord because the spiritual leaders were educated in the faith. There's a growing number of people today not educated in the scriptures. Knowing the word has become unimportant. We want our children to have the best secular educations, but care very little about the education of their souls. They know more about Cardi B than they do Mary and Martha. They know more about your body than the 12 apostles. Some of us older folk know that we used to be the same way. That you used to prove the songs describing the healing powers of sexual activity. Amen. That's what Mama used to sing that, right? Amen. Some of us in my generation know more about diving in the back sunroof, top digging in the scene with a gangster lean than we do the books of the Bible. Some of us have attended more clubs and hole in the walls than we have Sunday school. Amen. I'm here to tell you, do everything you can to get the word into your mind and your spirit. Don't miss a Sunday school or a Bible study. Don't miss a worship service. Don't miss a workshop, seminar, group study, vacation, Bible school, children's church, or revival, if you can help it. Get the word in your mind and in your heart. Meditate on it day and night. Rejoice in the word. Notice that the spiritual education occurred in the context of relationships. Fathers and children describe relationships. Elders teaching the younger is also about relationships. Timothy, the young evangelist, his mother and grandmother taught him again in the context of relationship. Believe it or not, truth without relationship is not the biblical way of sharing the faith. You see, truth without relationship is modernism. That's when the Restoration movement was birthed during a period of modernism. And so we became very proficient and intellectualized the faith to the point that we overruled or ignored the power and the importance of relationships. And so now we have a generation that is craving for relationship and experience. But relationship without truth is postmodernism. So you had truth without relationship. Now you have people craving relationship because they've been starved from healthy relationships. But they don't want truth. The biblical apologetic involves both. The biblical apologetic is teaching and speaking the truth in love. It comes in the context of relationship. In 1 Thessalonians 2:8, Paul says, so affectionately longing for you, we were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you have become dear to us. Paul says, I shared the gospel with you in a context of relationship. This will be the last generation if we don't develop generational relationships. You remember a couple of years ago when we taught on the different generations and we assigned a color to every generation. And we learned that each generation has been shaped by different and various experiences. But the gospel is for all generations. The gospel is not just for your generation, but the gospel is for every generation. Every generation has been shaped by a unique set of circumstances and events. Major and historical events, incidents, laws, leaders, wars, and developments make us different in a variety of ways. But we must also remember that we are also inherently similar. As the movie on Netflix goes, same kind of different as me. Same kind of different as me. Yeah, we're different, but we're the same. Joshua and the elders were not only educated, but they had also been exposed to different experiences. Psalm 78 verses 12 through 16 declares marvelous things he did in the sight of their fathers in the land of Egypt, in the field of Zoan. He divided the sea and caused them to pass through, and he made the waters stand up like a heap in the daytime. Also he led them with the cloud, and all the night with a light of fire. He split the rocks in the wilderness and gave them drink in abundance like the depths. He also brought streams out of the rock and caused waters to run down like rivers. You see, Joshua had a remarkable faith experience. He has seen the Lord work in his life. Joshua lived it. He saw the angel of the Lord. He heard the Lord's voice. He witnessed the Lord part the Jordan River. He was there when the Lord brought the walls of Jericho down. Joshua saw the Lord turn back the sands of time. He believed in the God of his experience. And because of his education and because of his experience, Joshua declared, and if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And so the text not only describes the encounter, but the experience, and finally the exit in verses 8 through 10. I pray this too may be my epitaph. It has been etched into eternal iniquity that Joshua is the servant of the Lord. Out of all things which could have been said about Joshua, consider how fitting this becomes. He is the successor of Moses. And the Lord spoke to him and told him to be strong and of a good courage. Joshua was a general. He was a man of remarkable faith against all odds. But at the end of the day, Joshua was the servant of the Lord. He was loyal to the one true God. Joshua did not waver in his faith. When he did seek confirmation, the Lord granted it. Joshua saw life from the perspective of God's sovereign rule. And since God is completely the supreme ruler, the appropriate posture for any person is to be his servant. The second generation arose after the initial generation all died off the earthly scene. This generation did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. This generation grew up living in freedom. They had never had to wander in the wilderness. They never had to come across the Red Sea. They had never been to Egypt. They had not eaten any manna from heaven. They had not drank water from rocks or wells. And I've discovered that many of us have not had to struggle like our fathers and mothers. Amen. My generation and the millennials and those behind them never lived in a period of slavery or Jim Crow South. In their world, black folks and women have always been able to vote. In their world, people of all colors and shades have always attended school together. We need a generation of old believers that know the Lord and what he's done in their history. The truth is, some of us don't know the Lord, nor what he's done for our foreparents. Some of us have always had indoor plumbing. Some of us have always had Dish Network, iPhones, and smart TVs. Some of us have always had washing machines and more than one car for the family, a bedroom all by itself, access to a refrigerator whenever we got ready, and a closet full of clothes. But I want you to know and understand that times have shown up change, that we have become so spoiled. There was a time when I would cut my son's hair. There was a time when a manicure was something that little girls played with for one another. There was a time when a pedicure was my cousin sitting down on the living room floor with paper bags on the floor, clipping my auntie's toenails. There was a time when children were brought to church. There was a time when they didn't have say-so about whether or not they came to church. There was a time when parents didn't come to church and leave their children at home. I mean, we become so spoiled. There was a time when you really had to meet a woman. I mean, you had to know how to talk. You had to have some game. But not today with all these dating apps and direct messenger and all of this kind of stuff. Men don't even know how to talk to women these days. Amen. And sometimes you wonder, how did he end up with her? How did somebody like him end up with her? Because he knew how to talk. Amen. That's all it was. He knew how to talk. Amen. He had a mouthpiece on him. He knew what to say. And while you're trying to direct message and all these things get around, he knew how to speak up. I mean, now everything is online. We went to school online. We go to school online. We shop for groceries online. We buy clothes online. We buy toilet tissue online. We buy electronics online. We get our car parts online. We attend groups online. You can either order Chick-fil-A, Longhorns, Ruby Tuesday, all online. Somebody call DoorDash and bring it to you. Now imagine that. Now think about this. Now we stop cooking. Some of our kids don't even know what a kitchen is for, because they ain't never seen nobody use one. And so think about this now. We don't cook nothing, but we'll take the time to DoorDash it. They got to get the message. They got to prepare the food. The DoorDash person got to drive there, pick it up, and then drive it to your house, and then you mad because it's cold. That hour that you was waiting, you could have marinated you a steak. You could have baked you a potato. You could have had you some asparagus. Amen. A side salad. You might even have time to make you a little cake. But we so smart. We dumb. We know everything. The folk before us didn't know nothing. We're very intelligent. I just thought I'd tell somebody that the church doesn't have a rotary phone anymore. We ain't got 8 tracks. We ain't got cassette tapes no more. Those things are in the past.
That's right, Bob.
Stop losing your mind when you don't see some of the traditions that you are accustomed to. Stop losing your mind because you see a sister with a microphone during worship singing a soprano or alto part.
Come on,
you know them red books that we have with us, musical invitations on it? Amen. It's 4-part harmony. Now, it's hypocritical of us to say it's wrong for the sister to have a microphone. She can sing, she just can't have a microphone. How much sense does that make? How consistent is that? That's pretty hypocritical. I don't care if you don't like it. You don't have to like it. But let's just be consistent in what we say and what we practice. 4-part harmony, we need to hear all 4 parts. Brother Johnson ain't got no soprano voice.
Come on, preacher. Come on. Show up.
If we want to be able to reach and communicate with the generation, we got to relate to them. We got to be relatable. Besides the fact that I done gained a lot of weight, and I don't need you to tell me. One of y'all walked up to me a few weeks ago. I ain't gonna say who it was. Said, you done gained a lot of weight.
Come on, preacher.
You know, I could have said you have too. I'm trying to be good.
Go ahead.
But part of it too is I want to be relatable. I told Sister Matthews last week, I said, you know, everywhere I go, I got to be Brother Matthews. It don't matter where I go. When I see somebody, oh, Brother Matthews. Me and Brother Leonard were on vacation. A couple weeks ago, we on vacation. Way out on the West Coast. This sister comes up out of nowhere. Hey, Brother Leonard. Where in the world did you come from? We can't just be here and be regular dudes. And so I dress like this not only because I gained so much weight, but also I want to be relatable. I'm a regular guy. And I want to show you that you can serve God and be a regular dude. I don't have a halo. I don't got no crown. I have the same frustrations. I have the same struggles that any man would have. I have weaknesses just like any man would have. I get mad. I get upset and angry just like any man would. I get frustrated with my wife just like you get frustrated with yours.
Come on, preacher. Yes.
She gets frustrated with me just like you get frustrated with yours. You have problems with your kids, I have problems with mine.
Come on, preacher. Yes, sir. True, brother.
Being a Christian does not exempt you from problems. It puts you in a position for God to help you with your problems. This is a new age. It's amazing. We want everything new in our houses. We want everything new in our houses. How can we keep up? I mean, when you buy this phone, before you can finish paying for this phone, now you three models behind. I mean, what? I did a little research on who some of the richest people in the world. Some of the richest people in the world are in telecommunications.
Amen.
It makes sense now.
Yeah.
Because we buy phones and don't finish paying for them before we get another phone. And then instead of, handling our business and paying our bill, we just let that mount up and we go to another carrier and get another phone.
Right.
It's quiet now, y'all ain't saying.
Come on, preacher.
And we're never caught up.
Right.
Because things are changing so rapidly. The TV, now they got 4K. Is that 4K?
4K.
Like, where did that come from? I just bought a TV last year in 4K, wasn't out. Now it's 4K, and I'm behind. We want to upgrade everywhere except in the church. We want to upgrade our rides. Amen. We want to upgrade our rides. But let us start talking about a new church bus, a church van.
Come on, preacher.
We ain't bought one in 15 years.
Come on, preacher.
See how y'all get? That's all right. That's all right. Amen. That's how we are. We want to upgrade in our life, but we don't want to upgrade anything that has to do with the law. I'm simply just trying to tell you, don't let this be the last generation. And in all seriousness, we have to go outside of these walls and start testifying and sharing the faith with the other generations. If what we doing ain't working, what you say, brother? Try something different.
That's right.
How novel of an idea is that? Let's try something different.
Yeah.
Let's talk to them. How about we, instead of beating them up all the time,
Come on, preacher.
why don't we build sincere, genuine relationships with them? Listen to them. Here is in a nutshell what has happened. Because in our society, so many people have violated public trust in the name of God. We have a generation of people who no longer have trust in the leaders of the church.
Right, brother.
That's just the fact of what it is. It doesn't matter that you're innocent. You have to deal with the reality that public trust has been violated. The core of all relationships is trust. So if there is no trust for the leaders and there is no trust for the church, for the body of Christ, we can complain about it, but that's not going to solve the problem. What we have to do is build and rebuild trust. How do we rebuild trust? We don't rebuild trust in here. We rebuild trust out there. How about instead of beating ourselves up and beating our heads against the Bible and against the wall about our own parents who won't bring their kids to church, that we start focusing on these kids out here in Dayton who wish that they had parents that knew the Lord. How about we start mentoring them?
right.
How about we start building relationships with them and teaching them practical principles about reading,
Amen.
practical things about being a man,
Right. Come on, preacher.
being a young woman.
Right.
Are y'all with me?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
If I said it was on my heart to do a mentoring program for young men this summer from ages 12 to 18, and I needed 8 to 10 brothers here to volunteer once a week for several weeks to join me in mentoring some young boys from the west side of Dayton. How many would I have that I could count on, that would be dependable, that would show up? Amen. Amen. Because, see, we can't say we're going to do something for them and then start making excuses and don't show up. We can't have boys showing up and we not showing up. Brother Jackson, you already do it all the time. Don't you teach folk how to lift weights? Well, don't you think you got something you can pour into some young men on the west side of Dayton? Brother Tucker, don't you hire and deal with a lot of young people in your work? Brother Landon, were you in the school system at one point? Amen. Brother Arnold, don't you know all type of things? Amen. Brother Paul, don't you know about finances?
Amen.
Brother Michael, don't you know about finances? Brother Greg, don't you know about military career, military life? Ron, don't you know about transportation? Amen. We got all of these skills and abilities here. I'm not saying we don't care about our own, but if our own don't care, let's focus our energy someplace else and meet some needs and do real ministry. That's what being the light of the world is about. That's what being the salt of the earth is about. All right, so when we push forward with this, don't be, I gotta work, I'm going on vacation. Reschedule your vacation. Okay, Brother Jack, you involve Brother Curtis all you want. It's called sacrifice. The Lord will bless you. Amen. Ain't he been good to you? Amen. Can you outgive him? I know that's right, my brother. Amen. I rescheduled a whole lot of vacations. I done canceled a whole lot of vacations. Amen. In fact, I deem you stay home the rest of this year. And I get 3 vacations to make up for some of the vacations I done missed. Bro Deacon. Amen. I'm finished. Amen. I'm finished. You're here this morning. You want to give your life to Jesus. I mean, Jesus is the answer. I don't care what the problem is. Jesus is the answer. He's the Savior. If you believe in Him and what He's done for you through death, burial, and resurrection, you're willing to repent of your sins, to confess your faith in Him, we'll baptize you this morning in water for the remission of sins. If you're here this morning, you need prayer. In our new members class this morning, we talked about prayer, importance of prayer. If you need prayer this morning, we'll pray with you, pray for you. If you're subject to the Savior's invitation, we invite you to come down these aisles right now as we stand.